All right, Jor, welcome back to the channel, man. Appreciate you coming back on.
Thanks for having me back, V. It's good to be back. I think you were my first ever podcast that I did, so it's been a little while.
Appreciate it. Well, congrats on 8,000 subscribers, 10,000 just right around the corner. Once you get to like 10,000 in like the YouTube space, like that's when like the algorithm really likes you. Like I went from 10,000 to 17,000 within like a few months, you know.
Really?
So I think you'll get there too.
Yeah, I've kind of noticed that. I think it took me about two and a half years to get to 1,000, and then like 6 months to get to 8,000. So I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's probably a combination of YouTube algorithm plus just people are like, okay, this guy's legitimate. He's got a bunch of subscribers. So it's probably a combination, but yeah, good. It's been good.
For sure. All right. The first question for you is a brief introduction about yourself for those who may not know you.
Yeah, so I'm Jor. I do a YouTube channel called 88 Sats Radio. I do a live show every morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time called the Daily Bitcoin Journey, and that's what it is. It just focuses on actionable and logical discussion for Bitcoiners and future Bitcoiners. So it's I kind of understand that, you know, Bitcoin is a very long-term thing. It is a journey. There's no destination. Whether you've been in here for 5, 6, 7, 8 years or 5, 6, 7, 8 days, there's always so much to know. There's always so much to cover. And no, it's been good. So the live show it's a different element too, because you get to kind of see where people are at, what kind of questions they have, their opinions on things. And so that's about it.
I like that. And also people can support via zaps and stuff like that, right? Too. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's one thing I just started doing. There's a thing called Zapstream, which connects to Nostr. So it's kind of cool. There's people on YouTube, there's people on Rumble, and there's people on Zapstream. So if people are enjoying it or they have a question that they want answered immediately, then they can send some Bitcoin over instantly without anybody's permission, which is kind of badass.
Cool. And like, what are the fees for that?
So you basically pay Zapstream per minute streaming. And so I think I don't even know what the rates are. They actually just dropped them about a couple weeks ago because of the recent price action with Bitcoin. So it was costing quite a bit to stream on there. So it's good. I mean, let's just use an example of a typical day. I'd say I'd maybe spend 500 sats on the stream, like paying for it. And most days I'll make like, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 sats usually. So it's a net positive. It's nice. I eventually want to kind of evolve into that. YouTube's been great for me for finding people, for connecting with people, but you still have to watch what you say on YouTube. And the stuff that I talk about, I always, you know, I'm not great at that a lot of the time. So I feel like Zapstream, eventually that's kind of where I want to get to in terms of the censorship stuff. But it, you know, since in the US, since Trump took office or since he won the election, actually, it seems like things are improving, which is good. YouTube seems to be backing off a little bit. Twitter for sure did. And it seems like the new trend within just society in general, especially in the West here, is that they're kind of backing off a little bit on the censorship stuff. So it's good, but I still want to have some backups, you know?
Yeah, for sure. It's because you're an authentic guy, you know, so the truth just comes out.
It's true. And I think that that's why people, you know, tune in every day. That's why they enjoy my channel, my shows. Is because I don't have any sponsors. I'm not owned by anybody. Nobody can really manipulate my voice. And yeah, I mean, it's just, to me, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear people be genuine, tell the truth, even if certain people don't like it. You have to. Otherwise, people will find out eventually. It's easy to be fake for a little while, but eventually, you know, with enough hours, with enough time, people catch on pretty quick. So I've been doing it for just over a year now, pretty consistently in terms of the daily show. And so again, when you're talking that much without a script, you're going to say some dumb stuff. You're going to say some stuff that you probably shouldn't have said, but that's okay. That's all part of it. That's me being human, right?
Yeah, I understand. So what would you say your biggest focus is on right now? 88 Sats Radio and the Bitcoin Journey, or your King Golf brand?
Well, in Canada here, we actually had a postal strike in November, December, as I'm sure you were probably affected by. And that really hurt our King Golf sales. Christmas is typically our biggest time of the year. And when people weren't sure if their package was going to arrive, they were kind of hesitant to order. So for the last, ever since Trump won, it's like he drove over Bitcoin with a thing of jet fuel. And so I've been overwhelmed with the amount of people looking to buy, looking to better protect their Bitcoin, and just, overall have more conviction over what they're holding, I think. So I would say my focus has definitely shifted kind of by accident, honestly, to like security stuff, to like thought experiments in terms of what could go wrong and how you can kind of counteract that within Bitcoin. And also like the inheritance side of things. I didn't really realize how much of a gap in the market there was for that kind of stuff. There's a lot of channels that are, they're sharing the news. They're getting people excited about Bitcoin. Mine's more so focused on like, okay, we have the asset. We know where it's going for the most part. How do we protect it now? And so I think that's why, there's been a lot of people show up on my channel for that reason, is because I talk about it. I think about things, everything that could happen. And then you think, okay, how can I protect myself? How can I counteract that attack or threat within Bitcoin? Because it is a very unique asset. It's an asset that we hold. And the beauty of Bitcoin is the fact that you can take actual custody of it, but that comes with a lot of responsibility. There's no middleman there. And that middleman in the past has typically insured us. If something were to happen to money within our bank, if somebody broke into our home and stole something, that middleman, the insurance provider there, they cover us. With Bitcoin, there's no middleman there, unless things will evolve in the space, but kind of where we're at now, you buy it, you hold it, it's on you. So people aren't used to that. I would say that a very small percentage of Bitcoiners are ready for that. And so that's kind of the purpose of what I've been doing, is just to kind of educate people a little bit and more so just get them thinking about what could go wrong essentially with it.
So would you say that's like the most common thing people reach out to you about when they're coming for Bitcoin help, like security, holding, cold wallets, all hot wallets, all that stuff?
Yeah, for most people who are just getting into Bitcoin, kind of what I've been saying on my channel, and I know that there's a lot of Bitcoiners who are probably going to crap on me for this. But when people are first getting into Bitcoin, and there are a lot of people who are getting into Bitcoin now, right? It's a very mainstream thing now. Everybody has questions about it. And so if people are looking to allocate like a significant amount of their portfolio or anything really into Bitcoin, usually where people lose it there, it's not because they get hacked. It's not because an exchange goes down. It's not because somebody breaks in their house and steals it. It's because they move too fast. They overcomplicate their stuff, and they essentially lock themselves out of their own Bitcoin, which is crazy, but that's a reality. So that's kind of the first step. Is I usually tell people, like, if you're brand new to this, if you're putting a significant amount into this, it's okay to sit on the exchanges for a couple weeks or a couple months while you kind of get your feet underneath you, get things in place, learn a little bit, educate yourself, invest some time. And then you kind of move it into, let's say, a mobile wallet where you can hold the key to it there. You own it. There's a little bit less that can go wrong there. And then you graduate to like a hardware device. And then you graduate to a multi-sig setup where you kind of eliminate yourself from the setup. And then collaborative custody. It's never ending here. And the whole thing, I think, what I try to talk about is like the fact that it is such an evolution. It's always going to be evolving. I think we've kind of moved away of the days of, I'm going to buy some Bitcoin, put it on a device, or, hold the key in a device and then bury it in the backyard and come back in 25 years. It's just not reality. There's going to be more threats that come up. There's going to be more technology and, evolutions within the space that help better protect it. And even in my short time in Bitcoin, I've really evolved my setup and become more aware of, what you're able to do with it. So it is still early. There's a lot of people who are, somewhat new to it. And I see it as just such a huge opportunity to help people. You're using something like YouTube, you having me on your show, just to get people thinking about things like this. It's I think the most talked about, underappreciated aspect of Bitcoin is like, how are you going to make sure your family has this in 50 years from now?
Exactly, because you're not just protecting the value of Bitcoin right now, right? You're protecting the value when it 10x's, 20x's, 30x's. Exactly. So you got to have that mindset. Oh, like this could be $1 billion or, whatever. I'm just throwing a random number out there, but you have to understand that it's not the value it is right now you're protecting. It's the value it will be in the future.
Yes. And that's exactly what I tell people. It's like, I don't want to spread fear. That's not my intention here. I don't want to scare people. I just want to make people aware of, what's coming here. So we're kind of in a really unique spot right now, and very opportunistic as well, because A, we have a chance to buy Bitcoin at these prices, which are not going to be around for very much longer. But B, we kind of were able to accumulate and then figure out our own security setup while everybody else kind of realizes the value of this thing. So it's not a threat today where somebody's going to come to your house and kidnap your family. I mean, we've seen it though in the last couple of months. So for most people though, that's not a threat today. But you do have the time today to start setting things up for when it is a threat. When your Bitcoin does go 10x or 20x, you're not scrambling. You're kind of already prepared for it.
For sure, for sure. So last time we did an interview was back in late May 2024. Bitcoin was right around $68,000. Since then, Bitcoin has gone up around 50% in less than a year. Have you seen like the general marketplace more bullish, or are people still sleeping on Bitcoin? I know you already spoke on this a little bit before too.
100% asleep. Like, even Bitcoiners are sleeping on where this thing's going right now. I mentioned Trump pouring jet fuel on Bitcoin, and the price shot up a little bit. The fiat price of Bitcoin shot up a little bit, but I think people are still getting used to like what's possible here. People have a very hard time comprehending what's coming here, because it's just so much different than the world that we come from here. And the world that we come from is very centralized. It's very controlled. It's very manipulated. It's designed to keep people down. And so I think that when it's like a fish born in water, when you're born into that system, you don't really see anything wrong there. But once you kind of take a step back and look at this thing with an open mind and say, okay, something's really, really messed up here, like really messed up. And then you find Bitcoin, you're like, okay, well, this thing isn't perfect. It has some flaws with it, but it's like the closest thing to perfect that's ever existed before. Plus, you have the US government talking about buying it. You have MicroStrategy, who's accumulated 500,000 in the last couple of years. BlackRock, 1 million. And I think that we haven't seen the point of like understanding how scarce this asset is yet, but I don't think we're too far away from that. And, today we can still buy here in Canada. I know our dollar's in the tank right now, but we can still buy like 700 sats for $1 today. And I think that, I don't know what the time frame on this is, but I know that as soon as the US government announces that they're going to start buying Bitcoin and holding Bitcoin as their stockpile, as a reserve, that's it. That'll be like the last chance, I think, for people to really, make hay with this thing. And because they're going to start buying it, they're going to be looking to buy 1 million coins, I think, over the next 5 years or something. You have to understand what China's going to do. You have to understand what Russia's going to do, what India is going to do, what the UAE is going to do. There's only so many Bitcoin. And we've kind of been for the last 16 years, we've been in a situation where it's guys like you and I buying it. And we don't really move the needle too much, right? People get really emotional. They buy when it's going up, they sell when it's going down, or vice versa. But we're very emotional. These coins that go into MicroStrategy, to BlackRock, to the UAE, to the US government, those coins are going to sit there for a very long time. And what that does is it really shrinks the available supply of Bitcoin that people can buy and sell and trade with. So I would say that the average person is definitely sleeping on Bitcoin. Most Bitcoiners are sleeping on Bitcoin, of understanding where this thing can go. And the train hasn't even left the station yet. But again, I really think that as much as we want to, cheer on the US Strategic Reserve, when they start buying, when they make that announcement, that's going to be like the last chance, I think, for people to really make a dent for themselves. Because you just kind of have to think it through. Today, you can buy 700 sats for $1. That happens. Let's say all of a sudden you get to, I don't even know what the price would be, but there'll be a day in the future where that $1 gets you maybe 10 sats, or save 100 sats, and then 10 sats, and then 1 sat. So basically, I think the day that the US announces the strategic reserve, people are going to look at their Bitcoin balance, and it's probably not going to move too much from there, because these are the times, these are the days when you're actually able to get a significant amount for the fiat dollars Once that happens, you're going to see your balance go up a little bit. Dollar wise, yes. But if you're looking at your Bitcoin balance, you're just not going to get the same amount anywhere near that you can get today for the fiat dollar. So it's exciting to me. It's exciting, and it's, that's why I focus more on like how to protect this stuff, because I'm kind of already living in that time, right? It's coming. It's just nobody's got on the TV and announced that thing yet.
Exactly. Yeah. Time goes by fast, like 10 years, it's just going to be a blink. And in 10 years, I mean, Bitcoin, I would say it's at least $1 million. That's already 2 Bitcoin halving cycles since then. And then one day, I mean, Bitcoin's only going to have it's going to issue 1 Bitcoin a day. Can you believe that? Like 1 Bitcoin a day. That's crazy.
In our lifetime, probably.
Yeah, in our lifetime. Yeah. So
I think it's 2056 or 2060. It drops down to 1 Bitcoin a day that's mined. So that's why I think that people should really be paying attention today. The US is going to announce it. People are going to go crazy. People are going to try to get as much Bitcoin as they can. I think that for the next 10 years, as Saylor has talked about, I think it is going to be this gold rush for Bitcoin. Because when that, like I think it's 2036, where there'll be 99% of the Bitcoin mined, which is crazy. So that's like in the first 25 years of Bitcoin, 99% of it will have been mined. For the next 1,000 years, we're going to be fighting over that last 1%. But I think what people really fail to understand with that concept is that if you look at the breakdown of who owns Bitcoin today, governments, public companies, private companies, and like funds, like hedge funds and BlackRocks, they own about 14% right now, 14% of the Bitcoin. Individuals own about 70%. A lot of those coins are deemed lost now because they haven't moved for a while. So when the new supply of Bitcoin over these next 10 years, we kind of trickle that out. When that runs out, those Bitcoin are basically going to have to come from somebody else now, right? They're going to have to come from guys like me or guys like you, because Michael Saylor's never selling his Bitcoin. The US government's never selling their Bitcoin. Those coins are going to be there for a very long time, probably longer than we're alive. And so when you understand that, the Bitcoin that's going to be needed for the rest of the world is going to have to come from us, we're basically the ones who set the price for it, essentially. Because if they run up the price to $1 million next week, I'm still not selling mine. So what is the actual value of Bitcoin at that point? What is the true value of Bitcoin? If guys who have been in here for 5, 6, 10 years, they understand what they're holding, they're not going to trade something fake for something real. They understand what they're holding here. So I think that once we kind of cross that chasm there, like this thing could go anywhere. There's absolutely no ceiling on how high this thing can go in terms of fiat and what kind of purchasing power that's going to allow people to have in the future. It's nuts.
For sure. How important is it to have people in your life supporting your goals related to Bitcoin? I remember you said Bridget, excuse me, I don't know if she's your wife or your girlfriend, said to take out a loan to buy Bitcoin one day.
It's very helpful. I would say that it's helpful, and it can be very harmful to a person, whether it's your husband who doesn't want to do it or your wife who doesn't want to do it. It can put your family's future at risk without them not even knowing it. And I talked with a guy, and I'm not going to dox anybody here, but I talked with a guy in the US about a week ago, and he was a doctor. And so obviously he has a little bit of cash kicking around. And basically he told me that he has $10,000 to put into Bitcoin because that's all his wife is letting him put into it. And this $10,000 was like from his college days. He put it in a savings account. That's the only thing that she'll let him touch. And it's shitty because he obviously understands Bitcoin. He wants to put some money into it. But because his wife hasn't spent probably 5 minutes looking into Bitcoin, she doesn't understand what it is. All she's heard is how bad it is for, used by criminals. It's a Ponzi scheme. The people who have spent 0 hours in Bitcoin, that's all the information they've received is the stuff from the media, from the banks, from the government. So they look at Bitcoin much differently than people who have studied Bitcoin and understood this thing. So, as a wife in that situation, she's obviously not trying to do harm to their family, but she's very risk adverse. She sees Bitcoin as a very risky thing. And so I think it is absolutely vital that the man, the woman are together on this. They both kind of understand it. Obviously, one would be a little bit more advanced, but it is. You have to understand it, because if you're trading your time and energy for this thing, you have to be fully bought into it. And you can't be arguing with each other of, it ran up, you should sell some of it, or, it just creates way too much friction with things. So traditionally, again, no fault to the woman there in that case. That's women, I think, by nature are a little bit more conservative, more risk adverse than males are. So yeah, it's been good to have somebody like Bridge here who's on Team Bitcoin for sure. It makes my life a hell of a lot easier, especially when I'm, doing a Bitcoin show on a Saturday here.
Nice. How about your dad? I know he was also in the financial sectors. Like, has he kind of gone from like, the traditional mindset into like the more, the way the direction of the world is going, like cryptocurrencies and, equities, buying crypto in their balance sheet and stuff like that?
Yeah, he's kind of the same. I mean, I have a lot of empathy for baby boomers. I know there's a lot of people who are in Bitcoin, and good on them for doing it. I have a lot of respect for baby boomers who are, taking this thing on. But guys like my dad and who are that age, let's say 60 to 70 years old and beyond, they grew up in the system when they were teenagers, when they were young adults, when they were having kids. They basically had three sources of news, which was the radio, the TV, and the newspaper. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have your show. They didn't have my show. And so they had 60 years there of basically programming to, think that the governments are trustworthy, to think that banks are trustworthy. And so it's very hard to kind of extract that out of somebody's brain. But at the same time, it's a big opportunity here, because the baby boomers are going to be basically the ones who decide how fast this thing goes, because they hold the majority of the wealth right now. And so that wealth is either going to be left in the traditional markets for the next 20, 30 years, or they're going to embrace Bitcoin and realize the importance and the urgency here with Bitcoin, and they're going to move this thing faster. But when that wealth eventually gets passed down to their kids aren't going to be buying gold. Their kids aren't going to be buying real estate. Their kids aren't going to be buying bonds. They're going to be throwing all that into Bitcoin. So this thing is going to happen either way. It's just the baby boomers are the ones who can kind of move it a little bit faster if they try to unprogram their mind, if they keep an open mind and see the fact that this is not something that's going up and down or I mean, it is volatile, but this is something that is going to be here for the next 1,000 years. And if they want to protect their kids, if they want to protect their future, their family's future, then Bitcoin is really the only asset at this point that can do that. So I would say that Dad is very much open to it. I don't think he has a really great understanding of what it is yet. But I mean, I talk to him all the time. So I think that the information that I give him obviously helps. And I wouldn't say that he's significantly allocated to Bitcoin in his life, but he does have some sats.
For sure. What do you say to people who think they will never get it, right? Like, I talk to people, they're like, I just don't understand it. I just don't understand it. I would say like, well, you kind of have to like make yourself understand it, right? Like you have to figure it out 1,000 different ways how to get to the conclusion, or like, don't just give up, right? Like if you don't understand it, well, try to find out how you can understand it.
Yeah, that's one thing I've really changed my mind on, and I'd say in the last year, because, when you first learn Bitcoin, when you first start understanding Bitcoin, you're like, holy shit, I got to tell everybody about this. I'm going to make it my mission to tell all my friends, all my family, all my coworkers. And you're in a different, people have to understand, like, you're in a much different spot than they are at that point. Let's say you spent even 100 hours in Bitcoin. You are at a much different state of mind and knowledge wise than they are. And so basically what I've stopped trying to convince people to buy Bitcoin, completely stopped, because it just seems like it's such a waste of time and energy for me to do. And so what I've changed my mind on is basically what I've started doing now is I took, like, let's say 3, 4, 5 people that I really care about in life, like my family, my friends. I just earmarked within my Sparrow wallet, I earmarked some Bitcoin for them. Right. So the nice thing about that is they're going to be probably taken care of this thing. If this thing does what I think it's going to do, they're going to be okay. I don't have to spend any more of my time and energy trying to convince them. I can allocate it to people who actually want to learn. And, the nice thing about that is they don't even know it's there. So I'm holding the keys to it. if they, if they wrong me in the next 10 years or whatever, they piss me off, I'll just pull it back. But then you don't have to worry about it. They're covered, right? It's not a huge percent of my Bitcoin. And it might end up being nothing. I might end up taking it back, but at least I don't have to worry like, oh my God, my family's going to miss this. So that's kind of what I switched my mind on, because you're right. You do have to come at you have to have an open mind before you get into Bitcoin. You have to see the need for it. You have to understand the history of the last 111 years and how we ended up here, why everything costs so much. Because if you don't understand that, you don't care. And so here in Canada, like most everybody has a bank account. You have a debit card or a credit card. You go to the store, you tap it, it works. So there's not a huge sense of urgency for Canadians with this, unless you actually understand why things cost so much today. And I kind of point everything that's wrong in society right now, I point it back to the fact that a small group of people can print money. So unless you're there, unless you've arrived at that point, then Bitcoin's pretty much irrelevant to you. And you're just going to see it as like a stock that goes up and down, and you're trying to sell it, buy it low and sell it high. And that's not what it is. So it takes hundreds of hours of time to understand it. And I just don't have the time or energy to do that with people who aren't quite there yet. I want to focus my time and energy on people who are there.
For sure. So with Trump winning the election and now officially in office, what does this mean for Bitcoin in the next 4 years? I know you said a U.S. strategic reserve is in play. You think that's just a rumor? You think he's going to actually do it? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think there's a couple things to this. I would say that, first of all, again, I think people who are wishing for the strategic Bitcoin reserve to happen faster, I don't think they know what they're wishing for here. Because when that happens, it's done. It's done. When the most influential government on the planet announces that they're going to start buying Bitcoin, and the thing on top of that too, because Cynthia Lummis has talked about this, Trump has kind of referred to this a little bit, but they said that they're actually thinking about selling some of their gold certificates for Bitcoin. That's kind of where they're seeing this right now. And if that happens, you have to understand what could happen with gold, because all the other countries on this planet are basically using gold as their strategic reserve right now. Like Russia's big on gold, China's big on gold, India's huge on gold. And so if the US were to come out and do that, the implications of that for Bitcoin would be, unfathomable. But with gold too, when they start dumping gold onto the market, who's going to buy it? Who's going to be on the other end of that sale there? So that they flood the market with gold, assuming this happens. I think that there's a couple different layers of this. This is obviously the most bullish case for Bitcoin, and who knows if it'll happen. But if it did, like, that's what I mean. Like, there's no ceiling on where this thing goes. But in terms of Trump, so there's been a lot of talk with Trump, with his meme coin, with XRP in the last couple of days here, with the emergency broadcast there about XRP. And the thing that really bothers me is the fact that people are really getting caught up in the weeds of this whole thing. Trump has never endorsed the Trump coin. Everybody's kind of expecting him to rug people with it. He hasn't yet. To me, I see the Trump coin very much like a baseball card. That's how I see it. And it's like, I'm a hockey card collector myself. And, I don't look at Upper Deck as like being scammers or ruggers. They issue all these cards. They're clear about the supply, I think. They send it out. They really have no value. It's just a piece of a guy on a card. That's all it is. And so I think that Trump, being the most, well-known, influential person on the planet, he just saw it as an opportunity. So I have no issues with hockey cards. I have no issues with baseball cards. I have no issues with the Trump meme coin. None. Timing of it was a little bit weird. But so anyways, what I always go back to here with the XRP stuff and everything is that I want people to, after the show, after watching the show, go watch the 2024 Bitcoin conference where Trump spoke. It was about a 40-minute conversation, or a speech, I guess. And he talked about freedom. He talked about pardoning Ross Ulbricht, which he did. He talked about sovereignty. He talked a lot about energy and how important it's going to be for our future. And he talked about our ability to hold the keys to our Bitcoin and really take asset of this, take custody of this. There's no other asset like Bitcoin that you can truly own. And so he's talking about the right things. And I know that if Trump wasn't serious about Bitcoin, if he didn't have a longer term plan with Bitcoin here, he would never have wasted his time at a Bitcoin conference. Because how many people are in Bitcoin? How many people really care about Bitcoin like we do? Like less than 1%. So to me, I just don't think that he would have gone out of his way to cater to such a small group of people, say those things, and then change his mind on it later. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So people get really caught up in like the day-to-day news stuff and like who's doing what and why it's so bad, and everybody has their opinion on it. But if you just go back and listen to that speech that he gave, I think you'll see where his intentions are with Bitcoin. And I think they are, it'll be a windy road, but I think he understands Bitcoin, and I think he understands the need to allow citizens within the US and around the world to really, it's an asset that people can take sovereignty with. And he understands that, I think. So I'm excited. I think that having a guy like Trump versus a guy like Trudeau or Biden, it literally is jet fuel on this thing, because instead of, having somebody in office that wants to throw you in jail, you have somebody in office who wants to, push this thing forward with you. So that's my thoughts on it. And if you look at Trump's last term, basically he measured his success on how well the stock market did. And so I think that this time around, his focus is a little bit more on Bitcoin. And so I think that he's going to make it like his mission to really drive this thing up. And he's probably going to take credit for it like Trump would. Bitcoiners know it won't have, much to do with him. But I think that that's going to be one of his measures of success this time around, is how high he can push the price of Bitcoin.
No, he's definitely going to push it up.
And I don't think he's going to do anything crazy other than maybe the reserve. But I think that he's just going to be, he's going to let it do what it needs to do, essentially, without stopping it. Right? Because over time, Bitcoin's eventually going to play out. Bitcoin's going to win. There's nothing that can stop Bitcoin. So you can either get in the way of it, like we've seen with other administrations, or you can just let it flow. And humans are very well capable of pushing this thing forward on our own, as long as we don't feel like somebody's going to throw us in jail for doing it.
So I heard Justin Trudeau resigned. So what do you think is going to happen in Canada now? You think you're going to get like a prime minister that's more Bitcoin friendly or anti-Bitcoin? What do you think is going to happen? What are they doing right now? Like, who's in his position?
I have no idea. Canadian politics are a joke to me, honestly. Like, I just see those guys sitting in their little parliament there, clapping and yelling at each other. And it's like, we're paying these idiots to do this. Like, I don't know. I have zero hope, zero like reliance on what the Canadian government does. Historically, especially in the last 9 years of the Trudeau reign, they basically said, here's the option that we have. We're going to go with the one 100% of the time that's going to be the worst choice for the Canadian citizens. So the nice thing about that, though, is a lot of Bitcoiners in Canada now are, I think that Justin Trudeau has done a lot of bad things, but he's created a lot of really good Bitcoiners in Canada because of that. So Pierre, I think, is probably going to win the next election, Pierre Poilievre. And he came out a few times and talked about Bitcoin. So I do think that he's going to be friendly to it. I do think that he's probably going to win. But at the end of the day, I'm more worried about myself and how many sats, I have, because that's the true freedom here. I don't really need my government to tell me, go buy Bitcoin or don't buy Bitcoin. I don't care. Right. And I know that this thing's going to win over time, either way, regardless of who's in parliament. So I'm more focused on getting as much as I can and protecting that. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I think we're definitely going to go in the right direction, mostly because it can't get any worse.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely the right mindset, right? Because government's going to come and go. Whatever someone does in one term is going to be probably a race in the next term. So it's all about, like you said, focusing on yourself, focusing on your loved ones, your family, your friends, building your future, right? Like how can you protect yourself? Because the government is not going to help you.
100%. That's, in the last 4 years, I think the best decision I ever made was one day I just decided I'm going to pay attention a little bit to what Trudeau and Freeland and those guys are talking about. And I'm just going to do the exact opposite of that. And whether we're talking like, medical advice, financial advice, any sort of advice that comes from the government. I just do the opposite of that. And so far, I've been winning.
Yeah, definitely. So what do you think about Trump pardoning Ross Ulbricht?
I love it. I do. I think that it not only the pardon, but it was like what is it, full pardon and commune or something. I don't know, like the fullest extent that he could do there. To me, more than anything else, like, God bless Ross. He went through 11 years of literal hell in jail, in a very small jail cell, pretty much solitary confinement. And you can argue whether he was right or wrong. I don't think that's the argument, though. The argument is they weaponized him, and they gave him, I think, two life sentences and 40 years for creating a website, because they didn't like what was happening. They didn't like the method of payment that was happening more than anything. Right? There's a lot worse things that happen in the world. There's a lot worse things that these people are involved with. And this was a very weaponized way of doing this. So, good for Ross, good for his family. It was a really good day, I think, for Bitcoiners. This was something that was at the top of everybody's list in terms of what they wanted Trump to do. And he did it. He didn't wait a month. He didn't do it the first day, but, he's a pretty busy guy on the day he's getting inaugurated. But the second day, so I think that, yes, great. Bitcoiners were very happy with that. I can't imagine what Ross is feeling right now. But I think it just goes to show the fact that Trump, he showed up for Bitcoiners. He made some promises to Bitcoiners. So far, he's shooting 100%. And so I have no reason to doubt him in terms of what comes next. That's kind of where I sit on it.
Cool. How has Michael Saylor impacted your view on Bitcoin or equities in general?
It's funny because Saylor has opened my eyes to what Bitcoin is, I think, for the capital side of things. So I would say that there's two guys that I very much respect their knowledge level within Bitcoin. And that's Michael Saylor and Jack Dorsey. Those are two guys that I pay a lot of attention to within Bitcoin. And I would say that Michael Saylor is on the side of this thing's capital. That's what's going to give Bitcoin its $450 trillion valuation, is its capital. He thinks that if it were to replace currency, it would be maybe 10 trillion, 20 trillion. And I agree with that. I really do. And that's kind of how I see Bitcoin as well, as I look at it as like very scarce digital real estate capital. I love his analogy of like a single block in Manhattan. One Bitcoin is one block. Like, I love that because it makes so much sense, because you can't create more I shouldn't say that. You can't create more land in Manhattan. You can build, but it is scarce. And I think that if people look at it that way, they see it as a much more long-term asset here, which is good. That's how I see it. I want to spend maybe, 5% of my Bitcoin over my lifetime. The rest is going to be for my kids and their kids and their kids in the future. So in that sense, it's capital. But I also very much respect Jack Dorsey's opinion on this, saying that if all Bitcoin becomes is digital gold, then it's failed, right? Because Bitcoin itself, if you look at the white paper, it says peer-to-peer electronic cash. That's what Bitcoin was designed to do. It was designed to separate money from state. And so if we just kind of focus on buying it and holding it forever, then it's not going to turn into what it was designed to be, which is a very private way to interact with anybody else on the planet. And when you look at it through that lens, it's like, holy, like, imagine a world where anybody in, India could participate. Imagine anybody in Uganda could participate in the economy, because traditionally outside of the Western world, I think a lot of these people have been kind of just trapped out of the system. Because if I wanted to hire somebody in Uganda to do a website or something, I would have to jump through 30 different hoops to even pay them money. So it's just not feasible to do it in that sense. Whereas now with Bitcoin, it doesn't matter what the bank says. It doesn't matter what PayPal says. If I have like a single Lightning address of theirs, I can send them value for pretty much free, without anybody's permission, and within seconds. There's no days to wait. There's no 30% fee on there. There's no checking with this bank and this bank. So that unlocks the whole world's economy there. And it gives people access to this economy, which is the internet. And so that's why, going along with, in addition to governments buying and corporations buying and hedge funds buying, just the fact that every person on the planet can participate in this with an internet connection, like that's such a huge thing to me. And so it's a little bit of both. It's definitely capital and it's currency, but when you understand all the things that it is, that's what really makes it so valuable. So I don't think it's capital or currency. I think that we should kind of be focused on both. And I think that that's we just can't lose sight of like this thing being a way to get rid of the banks, the central banks, I should say.
I agree. Just a side note, my best friend keeps on thinking Jack Dorsey is Satoshi. So who do you think Satoshi is?
I've had that theory as well, actually, mostly because I know how long he's been around Bitcoin. I know his experience in the past, and the guy wears one t-shirt that says Satoshi on it. Like, it's almost like he's taunting people with it. So, that scenario has played out in my head. Do I think that he is? Probably not, but I don't know for sure. I think that there's a lot of different theories. I think that, I don't know how to answer this question because I have my theories on it. Jack Dorsey would be one. There's a couple other people who I could point to, but my thoughts, like my main argument would be, I really think it's a group of people. I think it's a group of people who had access to a bunch of technologies, because this didn't, even though it was released in 2009, there was about 30, 40 years of building in the background of different components of it. So it might have been one person that just kind of put it all together. I lean more towards a group of people within like the NSA, something along those lines, which, somebody hears that, they're like, well, that's not good. The government created it. But once you understand Bitcoin, there's no bad actors that would benefit from unleashing Bitcoin on the world. So I think that that's kind of where I stand with it, is I do think it was a group of people. My opinion is somehow the NSA was involved with it, because you look at the SHA-256 technology, which was from the NSA, which gives Bitcoin a lot of its value. But you have to understand that regardless of who Satoshi is, whether it's the NSA, whether it's Jack Dorsey, whether it's Putin, like a lot of people think it is, it doesn't matter. It no longer matters now, because again, no bad actor benefits from a fully decentralized, trustless, transparent, fair monetary system. They just don't. And so that's kind of where I sit on it. And I think that that's one aspect, is the fairness of it from the very first block 0. Satoshi was the only person who was able to mine that. He knew that, and he made those 50 coins that were mined unspendable. So they thought this thing out. Whoever Satoshi was, they thought this thing out perfectly in my mind. They saw all these things that were going to come up. They wanted to make this thing fair from day 0, and they accomplished that. So at this point, it doesn't really matter who Satoshi is. I'm not going to spend any more time trying to figure it out. It's here now, and it's available, and anybody can participate in it.
So MicroStrategy holds 461,000 Bitcoin with a market value of almost $50 billion. That's about 2.2% of the total supply of Bitcoin that will ever exist. So do you think MicroStrategy will be one of the most valuable companies in the world?
100%. I think that it will be the most valuable company on the planet. And I think that once it gets to number 1, nobody will ever overtake them because of that. Kind of what I was going back to in terms of when the US starts buying Bitcoin, people are going to look at their balance of Bitcoin. Let's say you have 50 million sats. You're going to look at that, and even though the price in dollars is going to keep going up significantly, that 50 million sats is probably not going to fluctuate very much up or down unless you're spending it. But you're not going to be able to get as much as you could before. And kind of with that in mind, MicroStrategy has 450,000 coins right now. And if you kind of apply that theory to individuals, companies, countries, I don't think anybody's going to be able to catch them. I know that no other company is going to be able to catch them. I don't think the US government is even going to be able to catch them, even though they have this elaborate plan to get 1 million coins. Good luck. Because it's much easier said than done at that point. And that's the scarcity of Bitcoin. That's where this whole thing comes into play. And Saylor was able to make absolute hay in the last 4 years and accumulate these Bitcoin. And who knows what they're going to use it for in the future. But if you understand that Bitcoin is going to be the future reserve currency of the planet and nobody else can catch them, that's a pretty big deal to me. So yeah, I'm sure we'll get into a couple more questions there, but now it just the question becomes, you know, can they hold on to that Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's exactly where we're going to go to next. What are the risks to MicroStrategy? I know you just did like a in-depth video just I think yesterday or a few days ago. So do you mind explaining that to the viewers? Because you got to look at the both sides of the story, right? Even though Bitcoin's the most amazing thing in the world, there's a little bit of risk involved, and nothing's 100% guarantee. Maybe 99.9999%, but not 100%.
Yeah, so let me just preface this with the fact that I do own MicroStrategy. I'm a MicroStrategy shareholder, and I love Saylor. I love MicroStrategy. I love what they're doing. Essentially, what they're doing is they're shorting the fiat system, which, if you understand what's happening in the fiat system, there's only one way out of that, and it is never going to be turned around. So when you're shorting that, it's a pretty big opportunity. But I'll give you some of the cons and risks that I have for MicroStrategy. The first one that I think is probably the most important one is the counterparty risk. So you're and I'm comparing this, of course, to holding Bitcoin yourself. Buying Bitcoin, taking self-custody of it, protecting your keys that only you have the ability to spend. So I would say the first con for me is the counterparty risk from MicroStrategy themselves. The fact that they're going to have the Bitcoin and they're going to protect that Bitcoin. I think they have it at a couple different places right now, Coinbase being one. But you're basically trusting MicroStrategy that they're actually going to hold that Bitcoin. The entire valuation of MicroStrategy is based on how much Bitcoin they have. So they need to have that Bitcoin safe. So that's one aspect. You're trusting them with it. The other one is the counterparty risk with your brokerage. And what I mean by that is, like, yes, there's 330 million shares outstanding right now with MicroStrategy-ish. And so what I mean by that is, if you look at like how many shares are issued versus how many people have claims to those shares, I think anything within that system, there's a lot of, some funny business there. So there's a counterparty risk from the brokerage that they actually have the share that you have the claim to, essentially. So that's a risk. With Bitcoin, there is no risk to that. If you got the key to it, you can see it on the blockchain itself. You can verify that yourself. There's no risk with that. And that's another one, is the permission to hold. If we're moving into a fairly surveilled world right now, and if Justin Trudeau or whoever wins the next election here in Canada, they watch one of my YouTube videos and they decide that I'm maybe a terrorist to Canada, and they decide that they want to freeze my investment account, they could. So I need permission from the, whoever I use as my brokerage. I need permission to hold it there from people. And the big one for me is honestly, I'm honestly surprised by how much pushback I've received from Bitcoiners on this, but there's no proof of reserves here. That's what, that's a big one for me, because the whole Bitcoin ecosystem is based on the fact that you shouldn't trust people. You have to verify yourself. So the thing with MicroStrategy is that Saylor comes out every Monday and he says, MicroStrategy has acquired 11,000 Bitcoin today for the average price of this, bringing our total to this. And it's like, okay, that's great. It's a tweet. And yes, I know that they're a public company. I know that they're audited every quarter, but so is Enron. So I'm not saying that MicroStrategy doesn't have the Bitcoin. I'm sure that they do. I'm not saying that Michael Saylor's lying. I'm a shareholder myself, so obviously I trust him, but I don't want to have to trust him. That's kind of what I'm saying, is I think that there is the ability now, if MicroStrategy just shared like the 3, 4, how many addresses they have, people could verify themselves that they actually own that Bitcoin there. And I think that would go a long way in terms of, being on Team Bitcoin. It just doesn't make sense that they have all this Bitcoin. They haven't really shown anybody proof of reserves. So River is a company in the US. They show proof of reserves. El Salvador has been buying Bitcoin for the last couple of years. You can go onto a website and see how much Bitcoin they have. So it's possible. It's very possible. The other thing I would say for a threat is that the demand for MicroStrategy is eventually going to go down in terms of what they're doing today, right? because they have the ability to issue debt, convertible debt, to buy Bitcoin. They have the ability to sell some shares and buy Bitcoin with the proceeds from it. And they're talking about issuing preferred shares on top of this. And the reason why there's a premium on the share itself in regards to how much Bitcoin they hold, their net asset value of the Bitcoin, why is there a premium on top of that? It's because a lot of the buyers of this debt, of these shares and future preferred shares, they don't have another way to do it. They actually can't hold Bitcoin. So that's why you see these companies who are willing to give Saylor $1 billion at 0% to buy Bitcoin, because they can't buy Bitcoin themselves. And so if you're a public company, if you're a certain funds, they can only hold certain investments that's in their, shareholder rules or their regulations. So a lot of them can't hold Bitcoin yet. So again, if this thing plays out like we expect it to, you have to think that these companies will eventually be buying Bitcoin and storing it themselves. So they can't do that yet, but it's coming. So when these, companies who are buying MicroStrategy shares, or they're taking on, or they're giving Saylor proceeds to buy Bitcoin with, that will eventually dry up. So even, that's what they're doing today. I'm sure Saylor has thought about what they're going to do differently. Like he's aware of this himself. He's not an idiot. Probably one of the most intelligent guys on the planet. So he sees what's coming here. The demand for this eventually will go down. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of how it all plays out. When the demand does dry up, do they turn into a bank? Do they turn into like a life insurance company? Do they do a little bit of both? Because when you see it as capital, and when they have the most capital on the planet, there's a lot of different things they can do with that. So to me, what they're doing right now will eventually end the demand for it, but I don't know what happens from there. So those are kind of my main risks and threats to MicroStrategy that, I think that are most important anyways.
All right. I've been seeing sometimes in like the YouTube comments, people are getting burned by self-custody of Bitcoin, and they just go to MicroStrategy and hold that instead because they've been getting burned. They lost their coins, they lost their keys, so they're frustrated. And so they're like, okay, I'm just going to buy the company that holds Bitcoin instead. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's going to be more popular in the future. I think that is honestly a great option for people. That's kind of the conclusion that I've come to within MicroStrategy, is that it is the best option. It's the fastest horse. They understand this like nobody else does. And so if you have any money that's trapped in that system that you don't want to pay fees on or a bunch of taxes on, MicroStrategy is by far the best option. Like there's not even a second best right now, honestly. I would say, even compared to like an NVIDIA or stuff like that, like MicroStrategy is the best option. But so that the only thing better than that, I think, is actually holding the keys to your Bitcoin, holding the underlying asset there. So in regards to like people doing that, I think that it's actually pretty smart if somebody were, let's say you're just like hearing about Bitcoin now, you have zero, you don't have any knowledge either. I think it's a really good idea to, let's say go 50-50, get some Bitcoin, maybe leave it on an exchange. There are some very reputable exchanges out there. I wouldn't say Coinbase is one of them. Honestly, I wouldn't advise people holding it on Coinbase, but there are reputable exchanges here in Canada and around the world that will actually just hold that Bitcoin for you for a while. So take 50% of it, leave it on there for a while until you kind of get your feet underneath you, and then put the other 50% into MicroStrategy or into an ETF. I do think that you should be kind of well spread out. And as time goes on, maybe that goes to 60-40, and then 70-30, and then 80-20, where you're holding 80% Bitcoin, 20% MicroStrategy. As your education, as your comfort level kind of grows, you can kind of evolve with it. So I do think that it's a very critical piece of the whole plan here, especially for people who aren't as familiar with, how to do it and don't feel comfortable and don't want to put that much at risk when they don't know what they're doing. So I do think that there's a big place in the market for something like this. That is part of the demand, and that's why there's a huge premium on MicroStrategy, is because people just don't want to hold their own keys, and that's fine. But again, I think that everybody should kind of have the longer term view of eventually you're going to move this from your MicroStrategy account and just hold Bitcoin yourself. You can be your own Michael Saylor, essentially.
Got it. All right, this one's kind of like a fun thinker right here. So I think that the Bitcoin halving cycle every 4 years is going to probably be the most celebrated 4-year cycle in the world, more than U.S. presidencies, Olympics, maybe even the World Cup. How can you not celebrate your money getting harder every 4 years? Once that 210,000 block hits, maybe become a national holiday as well. So what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts on this, honestly, are that I agree with you. I think that up until this point, I think 2024 was kind of the first party that people threw for the halving. I think 2028 will be another huge party. I think it'll be even bigger at that point. And from there, I don't know what happens, because 2032, 2036, at that point, the majority of coins will have been mined. Like 2036, like 99% of the Bitcoin will have been mined at that point. So for the next 100 years, the whole every person plugging in a miner, everybody who wants to participate in this network, they're going to be fighting over 1% of the supply for the next 100 years. So depending on where this thing goes, like, it could be a massive holiday. It could be like, or people don't even care because the majority of coins are already in the wild, essentially. I would probably lean towards the first one. I agree with you. I think it is going to be a big thing in the future. It is kind of funny how it aligns with the US president's race. I think that was part of the design to get people talking about it, to become a political issue, especially early on. But yeah, I think that definitely it'll be it'll be like Times Square fireworks or wherever it'll be for the halving, because you're right. That means that the money is harder now officially. There's lots of it coming into circulation. But you also have to remember that it's fun to look into the future. But if we compare like the second most scarce asset in the world, which is gold, this year, 2024, Bitcoin actually passed gold in terms of being the most scarce asset on the planet. So gold is around 2%. Bitcoin officially dropped below 2%, and it's just going to keep dropping and dropping. So, it's going to be a big deal in the future, but it's also a very big deal now. It's just that most people aren't really paying attention to this yet.
Yep. So what do you think is the most important Bitcoin metric to watch, on the fundamental side, like mining difficulty, node amount and location, stuff like that?
Probably nodes. I would say nodes is a big one. If we want this thing to stay decentralized and secure, as Jeff Booth says, it's up to us. We have to be the ones running the nodes. We have to be the votes in this network to make sure that nobody changes the supply, nobody does anything stupid. BlackRock can't overtake it. A lot of people worry about that in terms of BlackRock and Saylor, like, capturing Bitcoin, or the US government capturing Bitcoin. You have to look at the incentives. BlackRock's poured a lot of money into selling this to their customers. They don't want Bitcoin to go down in value. They don't want people to distrust Bitcoin. They're pretty reliant on Bitcoin nowadays, and they're only going to become more reliant on it. So they're not a threat to me, but I do think it is still absolutely imperative that people run nodes. Like, the amount of nodes, as that number goes up, I think that that's going to be a very strong sign. I also look at the hash rate in terms of like where this thing's going to be going. The hash rate is essentially how many people are, how much energy is in the Bitcoin network. That's what the hash rate is. So how much electricity, how much energy is going into securing the network, how many people are competing for the next block. Every time somebody plugs in a miner, the hash rate goes up. Every time somebody unplugs their miner, the hash rate goes down. So historically, the price trails the hash rate by about 60 or 6 months, and we've just seen hash rate explode in the last couple of years. So I think, price has gone up too, but I think that hash rate and number of nodes is a pretty good indicator of where we're going to.
I know you look up to Earl Nightingale for inspiration. Are there any others who you'd like to acknowledge, or any mentors you are currently learning from?
Well, that's a great question. Earl's a big one. Earl's very timeless information, though. And I think that is something that I've really tried to do a little bit differently in my life. And instead of trying to find the latest hack of how to do, something faster, something easier, I look at timeless information that's been around for 100 years. What were they talking about then that's still applicable today? That's the kind of stuff I try to pay attention to. And there's no better place for me than Earl Nightingale. Other than that, there's Bitcoiners that I learned from. I probably spend 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day just listening to different people talk about Bitcoin. One of my bigger focuses these days has been more on privacy and on security. And so I've been listening to people that most people would never have heard of. So I don't think it'd be very useful to talk about. But one thing I would say, just for people who are looking for something actionable, is check out a guy he's actually from Canada too. His name's Sun, S-U-N, Sun Knudsen. And he's actually a privacy and security expert. He's got a really good YouTube channel. I wish he was a little bit more active on there, but you can go onto his YouTube channel. He actually talks about Bitcoin. He talks about privacy stuff, how to secure it better. I'm actually using one of the protocols and software that he uses to secure Bitcoin for my own stack. So that's kind of what I've been paying more so attention to, is like the privacy and security things. And I think that in this day and age, people should be putting a little bit more focus on their privacy. And, you don't have to go full steam ahead into this thing, but just like take small actionable steps every day to like get yourself away from Google, get yourself away from, that system of surveillance, and just kind of, again, take small steps. Everything should be taken in small steps. And, on that note, there's another guy that I've been introduced to, which is Dr. Jack Kruse. And he's a Bitcoiner. He talks about decentralized medicine and how bad like blue light is, how good the sun is for you. And, Bitcoin's great. You can have as much Bitcoin as you want to, but if you're not taking care of yourself and your health, then it really doesn't mean anything. So I've tried to been more focused on like how to secure it and my health more than anything else lately.
All right. Last question, Jor. The sign behind you, action cures fear. Can you explain that?
Where is it? All right there. Yeah, that's my, if you're a Bitcoiner, you appreciate that probably, because I did that myself just on a piece of paper with a Sharpie. I'd rather save sats than get that printed somewhere. So that is my handwriting there. It's just a good reminder. I can kind of see it in my own camera every day, which is good. And people like that. People like that phrase. And basically how I interpret it anyways, is that everybody, no matter who you are, you have worries in your life, whether it's, an outstanding credit card bill, whether it's, you need to get an oil change, whether it's you have to call your grandma or something. People kind of let these things build up throughout the day. And the more they build up, the more kind of like hunched over you are and tight you are. And so really the cure to that is just by doing something about it. And instead of going day after day after day with this thing kind of on your back and in the back of your mind, just get it done with. Like I think there's a phrase that goes like, eat the frog first thing in the day. And don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect at this. I'm actually very bad at it. But that's kind of a reminder for me, like whatever you're carrying around, whatever you're afraid of, whatever you're anxious about, it's not too hard to cure. Just do something about it. So that's kind of what the sign represents. It's something that I've been trying to work on within my own life. So it's a reminder for me, and kind of a reminder for anybody who, watches the show every day. Same kind of thing.
Nice. That's perfect way to end this. Can you shout yourself out, Jor? Where can people connect with you or reach out, watch your videos, stuff like that?
Sure. Yeah, my YouTube channel is just called 88 Sats Radio. The show is called Daily Bitcoin Journey. We do it every morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time. I spend a lot of my time on Nostr. So if anybody's on Nostr, maybe I'll shoot you my NPUB and you can put it in the show notes below. Are you on Nostr?
No, I'm not on Nostr. But yeah, definitely send me whatever you want me to put in the video description. I'll put it in. You
got to get on Nostr.
I know. I got to run a node too first.
Yeah, I would say Nostr is very low friction. You could do that today. Running a node takes a little bit more time. So that's going to be my goal, to get V onto Nostr ASAP. But I'll put my NPUB down there. That's where I spend the majority of my time, is on Nostr, talking to people on there. I think that if you're trying to learn about Bitcoin, if you're trying to connect with other Bitcoiners, even if you're trying to earn some like a side income of Bitcoin, Nostr is the place you want to be. So if you've never heard of it before, I have a lot of videos on my channel. I talk about it quite a bit on my show. It's like the social network of the social layer of Bitcoin. That's kind of how I see it. So anyways, I'll stop talking here. Thanks for having me on, V. And yeah, that's about it. Maybe I'll send you my email too. I like sharing that with people if they have any questions or something. One thing I've started doing lately is like a value for value thing. So for security, for any Bitcoin questions and stuff like that, I don't really have a set rate for hourly. I just, if you got 1 or 2 questions, you can just set up a call with me, and you can send me sats or you can send me dollars and whatever you feel like you receive from me. So that's something new I'm working on. and I'll extend that to your audience too if they're looking for some help with that. So again, thanks for having me on, V, for the second time. It's only I haven't been on many podcasts, but this is my number 2 on you, so I appreciate you, man.
No problem. We're definitely gonna have more. Definitely gonna have more. Sure. Thank you, Jor.
Thank you.